Hi there, welcome back to this channel. Now let us talk about respiration. Okay, now the process of respiration is the process by which chemical energy is being derived or produced from the food that is stored up in the body. Okay, I'm going to give us the technical definition, but I want us to first understand the difference between some terms that are commonly confused with respiration. Okay, so an average person would think that respiration is the same as the following words. Respiration is not the same as breathing. Respiration is not the same as ventilation. And respiration is not the same as gaseous exchange. So I'd like to start by demystifying these three, or mentioning the discrepancy between them. So breathing is divided into two things. We have inhalation or inspiration, and we have exhalation or expiration. Now, what do these terms mean? First, what is breathing? Breathing is the mechanical process of inhaling oxygen from the atmosphere for a human and breathing and releasing carbon dioxide out of the nostril or the mouth, whatever the case may be. When you take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, that mechanical action that requires your nasal cavity, your mouth, your buccal cavity, that is what we call breathing. The one in which oxygen is taken in, is inspiration or inhalation, inhale. The one in which carbon dioxide is taken out is expiration or exhalation. Now, how is it different from ventilation? Now, ventilation is the action of air movement through your cavities in your body. So that ventilation is basically the movement of gases out or in, not the active process of ventilation. Is just that movement. It's the term used to describe the movement of oxygen in and out. So ventilation is the term used to describe the action that that happens to your diaphragm, from your rib cage, your intercostal muscles. So generally speaking, this make up your thoracic cavity. So the increase in the volume of your thoracic cavity is because of ventilation, the movement of air in and out. So the increase and decrease of this thoracic cavity is what you call ventilation. Then gaseous exchange is what happens in it happens between the smallest, in your lungs. So when you breathe in, the air goes into your lungs. So inside your lungs, there are what we call air sacs. Air sacs with the technical name alveoli. All right, and I would not want you to confuse this with areola. This is different. Areola is at the tip of your breast. There's a dark portion. That one is areola. This one is alveoli, that is The plural, the singular is alveolus. So an air sac, now what will happen is that between that air sac and the surrounding blood capillary, there's going to be an exchange of gas by diffusion. So gas from that you took in to your lungs, that is oxygen that entered into your lung, will make their way. Let me tell you the system. So from your lungs, from your nose, it goes to your lungs, and it goes through your trachea, through your trachea. This is your trachea here, okay? Then this is your bronchus. This is your trachea. Then this is your bronchus. These two branches here, that's why we call it bronchus, branches, okay? This is your trachea. Now this place is what you call trachea. Trachea. This place is your voice box. Your voice box or larynx. So your trachea branches into these other tubes here that we call, these two are together called bronchi. They are branches, bronchi, singular bronchus. So you have your guy here, your lungs. So inside your lungs, this guy is now further branch like trees until they now branch into tiny air spaces called air sacs. Okay, we call them alveolus. So in that air sac, if I were to zoom in what we have here, an air sac will look something like this, will look something like this. Then surrounding each air sac, we have blood capillaries. Okay, blood capillaries. Now, what are the blood capillaries doing? You would have heard that your pulmonary artery is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. The reason is because that pulmonary artery is the one that enters into the lungs. You already know that. So the pulmonary artery bring deoxygenated blood, and that deoxygenated blood makes its way into the blood capillaries surrounding the alveolus. Then by the action of an hormone known as carbonic anhydrase, that guy, the oxygen that has entered into here will diffuse into the blood capillary. Oxygen diffuses into the blood capillaries to oxygenate the blood, and the carbon dioxide from the blood will diffuse into the blood lungs, into the air sac rather, so that it can make its way out, and then you can breathe out carbon dioxide. All right, then the efficiency is not 100%, okay? All right, they have a ratio and percentage, but that's the case. The case is just that the oxygen enters your blood capillary and carbon dioxide goes out and makes its way in the same direction back out. So that is gaseous exchange. What happens here is what? Gaseous exchange. The second place where gaseous exchange occurs is between your blood capillaries now, and the cell. This one is alveolus cum blood capillary. In this one, blood capillaries cum your cells. You know, the reason why blood is flowing in your body is one major reason is to distribute oxygen to your cells. So at the cell, oxygen will not be released to the cell. Okay? Now, so that is gaseous exchange. So how are they different from, these three things different from respiration? In respiration, we define it as the breakdown of, respiration is the breakdown of macromolecular food substances. Macromolecular food substances that we have digested and absorbed. Okay, your body has stored up these macromolecular food substances. Example is glucose. So glucose, for example, is one of the macromolecules that will be broken down for the release of energy. Okay, there are two stages, there are two types or two processes by which this occurs. But the point is that in respiration, we are breaking down a macromolecule to release what? Energy for various activities. All right, now let's now talk about the types of respiration. The first type of respiration is aerobic respiration. Do you remember that? Is that? Okay. We have aerobic respiration. Now, when you hear the word aero, you know from aeroplane, that is air, right? Having to do with oxygen. Then we have the anaerobic, that is not aerobic respiration. Okay, now let's deal with the aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is the one that happens in the presence of oxygen. Okay, it happens in the presence of oxygen, and because it happens in the presence of oxygen, there is complete oxidation or breakdown of that macromolecule. Okay, so let me rephrase the definition of that respiration. It is the breakdown of macromolecular food substances with the use of oxygen, with or without oxygen rather, to release carbon dioxide and energy. Exactly, those are the two products that are consistent in both. Okay, so now watch me now. For aerobic respiration now, we will require oxygen to break down glucose, which is C6H12O6. It will be oxidized and it will give us, to produce CO2 plus H2O. Actually, this reaction is too simple to explain the process of respiration. So in my biochemistry series, I'm going to talk about the nitty-gritty, where we'll see glycolysis, the glycolytic pathway and Calvin cycle. What's it called? Krebs cycle, I'm sorry. Calvin cycle is in photosynthesis, so Krebs cycle. But for now, just to simplify things, we will use this equation. So to balance off, we had 6 here, 6 here, and 6 here. You can already see that it's the opposite of photosynthesis, right? So now, this guy will require oxygen to break down completely to release energy. Now, I'm going to tell you the measure of the energy in kilojoule per mole. Actually, we release about 36 ATPs in 36 net ATP in aerobic respiration. In kilojoules per mole, that is about 2,820 kilojoules per mole. 2,820 kilojoules per mole of energy released in aerobic respiration. Now, where does it take place? It takes place in the mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria of the cell, we call it the powerhouse of the cell. Yes, the reason why I call it the powerhouse of the cell is especially because of this. That is where energy is being produced. That's powerhouse. Is that clear? So it takes place in the mitochondria, and there is complete oxidation of glucose. Okay, so and because there's complete oxidation of glucose, we produce carbon dioxide and water and high amount of energy. Okay, let's look at the second one, which is anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration is the one in which glucose is broken down in the absence of oxygen. I repeat that. In anaerobic respiration, glucose is broken down in the absence of oxygen. So that already essentializes the fact that since there is no oxygen for the breakdown of glucose, then there will be no complete oxidation of glucose. That is, there will be no complete breakdown of glucose. And there are two forms of this. We have the one that takes place in the fungus yeast. We call that fermentation. That's the first type of anaerobic respiration. The second one is the one that happens in our muscle, in the animal muscle. So let's call it animal muscle. In the muscles of the animal. But in this case, I want to use humans. Okay? Now, the fermentation process, okay, this is the way it goes. For fermentation, what happens is this. The C6H12O6, that's glucose, will break down directly. Notice it is happening in the absence of oxygen, so it will break down directly to produce for fermentation, what we produce is ethanol. Okay, ethanol is C2H5OH. Okay, so this ethanol plus CO2. Is that clear? So if you balance it out, to balance this out, we have 2 here. If you put 2 here, let's see. So that's 4. If we put 2 here, let's see. That's 4 plus 2, 6. 10 H's plus 2, plus 4, 10 H's plus 2, that's okay. Then 2 O's plus 4, that's 6. Okay, please balance now. So you then plus energy. So now, what is the amount of energy produced here? You will notice that because there is incomplete oxidation or incomplete breakdown of glucose, then the energy that is produced is very less. For these guys, fermentation is even a lot higher than for human. In human muscle, in their own fermentation, yeast fermentation, they produce about 210 kilojoules per mole. Compare this to this. This is 2,820. This is 210 kilojoules per mole. You can see the heightened difference. So my point is that in this, and this one takes place in the cytoplasm. It takes place where? In the cytoplasm. Already you can guess why, because it is not undergoing oxidation, complete oxidation. Okay, there is no oxidation. In fact, there is no oxidation. And then of course, this guy, fermentation, takes place in the presence of an enzyme known as zymase. Okay, or in the human cell we have the invertase. Okay, so let's talk about in the human muscle now. The muscle cells, they also break down C6H12O6 in the presence of the hormone invertase. The enzyme, sorry, this is an enzyme, not hormone. Enzyme. It breaks down to produce lactic acid instead. Now, lactic acid has the formula C3H6O3. Structurally, this can be the structure. Let me show you the structure. It's just CH3CHOH COH. So I wanted to show you this so that you see it's an acid. An organic acid, COH group. That's what makes acids here. So plus CO2. When you see COH is an acid, that's what I want you to get here. All right. So structurally you have CH3, CH, then OH attached here, then C double bond OH. All right, so this is lactic acid. All right. So my point is that this guy releases, try and balance this one yourself, okay? So plus energy. Now the amount of energy released here is basically around 130 to 150 kilojoules per mole. Now, but let me take it on the high end. But you can notice also that it is very, very much less than this. Okay. Now, what is the importance of this? In breweries or industries that produce breweries or wine industries, they use this fermentation process to produce what? Alcohol. And because ethanol is one of the chief ingredients used in the alcohol industry. So this is the process by which they use it. Okay, they use yeast for fermentation of glucose to produce ethanol. Then another thing you should also know is that this guy also takes place in the cytoplasm of the muscle cells. Now, there's something you should know. When does this occur in our own muscle? For example, in the muscle of the animal. Now, it occurs when we are engaging in vigorous activities. Now, during those period of vigorous activities, we cannot give the cells of the body the oxygen that it needs, the total amount of oxygen that it needs readily. So for that reason, the body will revert to this for faster production of energy. Is that okay? So it will quickly it will break down the glucose that is required for energy, even though the amount of energy produced is not enough. That's why you feel tired when you just complete, for example, a race, when you just finish running. Then I'll tell you something again. When you engage in physical activities, you will see that your muscles, they ache you, right? The reason is because of this acid. This acid will increase the pH of your muscle, and when the pH of your muscle increases, acid is sour, right? So because of that, that sour feeling makes your muscle begin to ache and pain you. Exactly. So it's because of the presence of lactic acid. And that's why immediately after the race, for example, you now begin to breathe heavily to make up for the amount of oxygen that you need to break this lactic acid down. Is that clear? That amount of oxygen needed to now break, to oxidize this one, is called oxygen depth. Oxygen depth is the amount of oxygen needed to break down the lactic acid produced via the process of anaerobic respiration in the muscles. Is it clear? That is oxygen depth, not depth, depth. So oxygen depth is that amount of oxygen, the excess amount of oxygen that you now need, not excess, the remaining, the oxygen needed, the more oxygen needed, the additional oxygen needed to break down this, to oxidize this one, to release CO2 and H2O. Usually, if this CO2 is accumulated, after you begin to feel muscle cramps, like I said, cramps and pains, right? Now what will happen is that this will now be transported to the liver, where they will be oxidized into CO2 and H2O. Is that clear? All right. So that is the my short explanation of aerobic and anaerobic respiration. But of course, then you can begin to differentiate between them. I want you to create a table in your notes where you differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Maybe we should quickly go over that. So I said that in aerobic respiration, this one, anaerobic respiration. Now in aerobic respiration, we said there's complete oxidation, complete breakdown of glucose. But here there is incomplete breakdown of glucose. Now, in aerobic respiration, I said aerobic respiration takes place in the mitochondria. This one takes place in the cytoplasm. Then I also said that this one leads to oxygen depth in human. There's oxygen depth. Oxygen depth. This one, there is no oxygen depth. No oxygen depth. This one leads to production of high amount of energy, as high as 2,820 kilojoules per mole or 36 ATP. While this one produces net amount of 2 ATPs or 130 to 150 kilojoules per mole in human cell. So low amount of energy. Is that clear? So those are the things that you have to know about respiration on the basic level. All right. So that'll be it for this video. Do want to subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification to get notified whenever I drop another video. God bless you.